the Implementation Committee meeting to order at 1:01 p.m. Thank you all so much for being here. And are we good, Oswaldo, for the live feed to the public?
Yep, we're good to go.
So for anyone watching on the public, we're not going to put the documents up on the screen, but they are available on the Police Reform website. So if anybody from the public wants to follow along, we're going to be reviewing 3 documents today, and you can access those on the Police Reform website. Hi, Gary.
Hi, Gary.
So Supervisor Bury, I was thinking because the camera policy supplement authored by Supervisor Chimides kind of takes some of the existing temporary policy and recommends some changes, I thought we would start by going through that document. It's a number 1 through number 8. Does
Sure.
that make sense to you?
That's fine with me.
All right. So I don't know that we need to review the introduction per se. It's really just an introduction as to, body camera policies and why they're important. One thing that's bolded that I would like to iterate is clearly defined policies and procedures must be developed, put into practice, and audited carefully. Obviously, anything you have, is only as good as the policy to follow. So body cameras are a great thing, but we're here today to talk about what policy guides it. And just a little background, the Board of Supervisors did approve, and really Sheriff Bartlett's office has full autonomy over policies, but with the blessing of the Board of Supervisors, they did adopt a temporary policy about body-worn cameras, which is basically just the DCJS template. And then we're here today to talk about how we want to make it our own and make it really work for Columbia County. So number 1 talks about the buffer mode. And the recommendation is that we set the buffer mode to record audio and video for 120 seconds before the event button is pressed. It goes on to say longer recordings provide more transparency and demonstrate the county's commitment to using the body cameras to their fullest. Axon provides this service at no additional cost. So just a little bit of background for this subcommittee. My understanding is that there's a 30-second default setting if you don't set a specific time frame in your policy. It defaults to 30 seconds, and when the officer presses the record button, what that does is it buffers back however far, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. In this case, the recommendation is 120 seconds from when that button is pressed. I have my own thoughts on this, but as one of the co-chairs, I'm going to turn it first to others on the committee to open it to a conversation about the amount of time for the buffer mode and why people feel it's important one way or the other.
Okay, I'll go first if I could.
Sure.
I certainly know when we were doing the reform, going through the documents, the sheriff had a lot of opinions on this. But I've also, I've talked to quite a few people in the community, some people that were very familiar with the new technology of body cameras. And there were a varying degree of what standards we should have when it comes to the buffering of the cameras. And I definitely have an opinion on it, but I know the sheriff's office felt so strongly about their interpretation of what they thought it should be. So I certainly would like to hear from them before, or the sheriff or someone representing them, before I was to interject and put forth my thoughts on it.
And I'm on now, Bill. I'm sorry I'm late.
Yep, no problem, Sheriff.
Hey, Sheriff Bartlett, we're talking about the buffer mode on recording audio and video. The default, as I understand it, is 30 seconds, which is what it is now. And the recommendation with the policy supplement authored by Supervisor Chimides is that it go to 120 seconds. And I basically deferred my opinion for now because I'm one of the co-chairs, and Mr. Hughes also would like to hear from you. So do you want to take the floor first, Sheriff Bartlett, as to what you see the buffer time as and the benefits of one way or the other for the amount of time?
Yeah, I'm going to be quite blunt and straightforward that I'm totally against 120 seconds. These police officers, if we set and we time right now 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 120 seconds, it's an eternity. And even if we just sit and do 30 seconds, and these police officers out there in the streets, they could be talking to their doctor. They could be doing so many other different things that are personal in nature that at that point, if it was a look back of 120 seconds, would capture all that. And I think we also need to think about those police officers out there and their privacy and stuff that they're doing as far as, again, if they're talking to their wife or whatever, or their significant other, that we need to be cognizant of that. Also, I think, we should talk to the union about this, and the union may have a say. And I believe the district attorney's office also should be, thinking about this and looking at this and possibly putting their 2 cents in.
Great, Sheriff. I thought that was your comments from the last time around. So for my opinions on that, and someone who, when I was on the board, was definitely sitting on the labor management, actually helped create the labor management committee. When we're talking about the abilities of officers, to have privacy and union restrictions and things of that nature, I would myself personally would like clarification on when an officer is now on duty. What are their time requirement obligations? Because I know when you're in other roles within the county outside of law enforcement, when you're on the clock, you really don't have personal time, right? You're working for an employee. You're obligated to be working for that employee, and you have break times, 2 15-minute breaks and a half an hour lunch. I don't know what that breakdown is for law enforcement officers, but I would certainly love to have clarification on what kind of liberties they have as far as when it comes to personal time while they're on the clock.
We don't get breaks. We don't get lunches. If they're able to grab a lunch, of course, they do grab a lunch time frames, like, with 424 employees and so on and so forth. They get their breaks and so, but, and all due respect, you and I go back a long way, but there are personal things that go on in an 8 or 12-hour period or longer. We just had this extensive search this past week that myself and my people were in the fields, literally looking for this poor individual. And, I had to call my wife in the middle of it all to say, hey, I'm going to be late because I'm still going to be working. I don't know how many hours passed when I should have been home. And we're trying to find this gentleman. And so there are personal things that go on. And I got to disagree with you on that.
Well, no, it wasn't an opinion, Sheriff. I didn't have an opinion one way or the other. What I was saying is, probably, if we're going to get through this 120-day versus 120 seconds versus 30 seconds, maybe we need to start with outlining what time requirements are, if there are any time requirements, or if indeed we even go there at all. Because, like I said, I don't know if other law enforcement departments have say, okay, you punch in that, and I know we don't have a time clock for our officers anyway, but okay, you're on duty at such a time. And I don't know if you have a policy on this, Sheriff, what are the liberties in between that time? So, because that right there is a huge factor on what we can require our officers to do, if there isn't anything in writing.
I'd like to have the captain chime in too, if I can here, Bill, because
Okay.
The captain's done a lot of research. And Captain Bray, are you on?
You're muted, Captain Bray. He just stepped off, Sheriff Bartlett. Oh, now he's back.
Yeah, he's going to try and probably get back.
Yeah, for whatever reason, my mic wasn't working. Just a few things hi, good afternoon, everybody. A few things to add and echo with the sheriff, about the buffer mode. He mentioned 2 minutes is an extremely long amount of time. And it's important for everyone to understand that this buffer mode is going to capture a lot of things that are unintended. For example, the deputy could be going to the bathroom and an emergency call comes out and he or she runs out to their car and turns on their lights. They've now bathroom. If they're eating a meal at home or at a restaurant and they have to run out for an emergency and turn the lights on, they've now been recorded eating their meal or having a conversation with their wife at dinner. If they're on their cell phone, unlocking their cell phone with a passcode, or they have a text message from someone, that would be recorded in that buffer mode because they weren't prepared for it. Additionally, and more importantly with these body cameras, is every agency in Columbia County is going to have them at some point, and they're all using the Axon systems. And I could be recorded without my knowledge very easily if another police agency came in the vicinity of me and activated my camera for me, even if I'm not involved in the incident. So my privacy is gone if there was any, because these agencies have the ability to activate each other's cameras when they're in close proximity to them. And you never know, I could be using the bathroom again when a police car comes by or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of concerns with that 120-minute or 120-second buffer.
So Sheriff Bartlett and Captain Bray, I have a question. So I feel like there should be, if there's not already, a redaction policy. And I do hear what you're saying with privacy of officers. And I agree completely. Nobody should have a video of them, using the bathroom that's released in any way, or if there happens to be a private conversation. So couldn't the answer be that in the redaction policy, it's clear that if something that's recorded is not relevant to the incident, that it could be redacted? Maybe a judge or somebody makes that decision. But one thing I'm looking at, not only protection of the public, but also protection of the officers. Let's check. There's an incident where somebody from the public, yells, "He's got a gun." And the officer starts running and then is like, "Oh, shoot, my recorder," and presses record as he's running. It's been more than 30 seconds. And the officer actually responds in a perfectly reasonable way to the information that he was given. That guy has a gun. But because it didn't pick up that audio, it looks as if the officer may be acting in a way that's not appropriate because his actions had to do with something that had occurred that actually didn't on that camera, because once he presses the record, it's only 30 seconds back. So, couldn't the answer be, I believe, in my understanding, all personal information, like somebody going to the bathroom, would be redacted off a body camera recording before, getting released publicly or to the DA's office, to the PD's office? Couldn't the answer be that we have a solid redaction policy in place that defines that personal interactions, such as the ones you're referring to, would be redacted out before the release of any video?
But that's where we get into, if we have stuff that's going to be used as evidence in the case of mine, and now stuff's acted from that file, there could be issues with that also. People are saying they don't want the recordings altered in any way, and especially if we're dealing with some type of a criminal case, we don't want it altered in any way. But now, if we have something where, again, going as simple as going to the bathroom, now it's redacted, but people are also going to say, well, what else did you redact? What else did you take out? It's sort of like a...
But I think it would have to be clear.
I
think it would have to be clear in the policy, and it couldn't be, the sheriff's office deciding or the civilian review panel deciding, but, maybe a judge. It would be clear what would be allowed to be redacted, and if something was redacted, it would fall under those parameters.
So I certainly appreciate what Captain Bray brought up, and I think those are all valid concerns, which again kind of goes back to why I was saying that when we're thinking about when our officers come on duty, we have to look. This is a new way of doing things. The old way of doing policing, the old way of even doing work, period, for all jobs, is going to change with technology. Our policies have to catch up with that. And so thinking forward, when we're looking at, okay, our officers are coming on duty and we have new technology, which is the cameras. How do we craft a policy that will be fair to our officers, but that will also protect the public? That's ultimately what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make sure that while our officers are out protecting and serving us, that they have technology that will protect them and that will also protect us and the public to make sure that what an officer says when he approaches us is what he is actually, what he, what he claims he said is what he did say. So that goes back to my point is that for us to look at the cameras or look at these policies and determine what is going to be best for both. And maybe 30 seconds is the best, or maybe 60 seconds. I like what Supervisor Hoteling is saying. Maybe it goes to a judge. We skip past going the review board because that gets into what the sheriff just says about the redactions. But if you go to a judge and said it can only be certain areas can only be redacted by a judge, I would think that we all here would trust that policy.
Any other panel members that haven't spoke yet?
Dave Hall. Yeah. I feel grateful to be on this panel, and one reason is because it's challenged me to really, really look at both sides of all of these issues that we're talking about, whereas I might have come more from a civilian point of view and a person of color citizen point of view. And so I'm really always trying to keep the professionalism, the working conditions, and the privacy in this case of the police foremost in my mind too, just because by nature that wasn't what I was thinking of first. So my first gut reaction was, oh yeah, 120 seconds, 120 seconds, that gives us as much information as we can. And yet at the same time, it does open up because as we know, 60 seconds is a really, really long time. If you're setting your home alarm, you have 60 seconds to sort of go back and fix it. You can walk around your whole house in that 60 seconds. So it definitely is a long period of time. But I noticed it said there were instances where an officer might not be able to turn on that camera right away, that it might be a dangerous situation. So in fact, that we might not get footage until a little ways into an interaction. So I thought, oh, well, the 120 seconds gives us just that much more in case the initiation of the camera is a little bit delayed into the interaction. And I feel like if there's a really strong redaction program, as Supervisor Hoteling has suggested, that would certainly, I hope, cover privacy issues, which I think are hugely important. But the one thing that Officer Bray just brought up, which is the first I heard of it, is you mentioned that other agencies can turn on your camera without your realizing it. And I'm wondering why that is, and if there's a way that can, if we can prevent that, because that just seems like the cameras can go on willy-nilly, and who knows what's happening to your information and to your privacy.
Yeah, it's a program from Axon. It's meant to alleviate the need for the deputy or the officer to activate their camera in an emergency situation. So when another police officer comes up, it's called Axon Signal. They have to be in close proximity. They're not going to activate across the county or across the town. We're talking 30 feet here. So they come on automatically. Any body camera in the vicinity of the emergency will automatically activate once the Axon signal is sent out.
I see.
Meant to do that purposely, so we get every body camera turned on, because
I see.
An officer or deputy with their gun drawn can't activate.
Can't do that.
If somebody else turns on their lights or gets out of their car and turns theirs on, it will activate everyone's in the area.
I see. Okay, that makes sense, and I appreciate that explanation. So again, it seems to me that, given, as the supervisor said earlier, there may be something that happens within 2 minutes beforehand that triggers a reaction on the part of police officers that might go beyond 30 seconds. So it just seems to me that if we're going to give as complete a picture, if ever we need to examine this footage in the case of a complaint or a challenge, that we've got as much information as possible. But I totally hear us on the privacy issues, and that it seems to me if we have a really strong redaction policy, the privacy not only of police officers but bystanders can be protected as well.
I have something. So, as I'm listening to the 120 seconds versus 30 seconds, I think some very good points are being brought up on both sides. But to go back to what the sheriff is talking about, they're going to pick up, if it's 120 seconds, you invariably will be picking up something, at some point in time that should not be there. It could be a personal nature. And, we talk about an officer using the bathroom. That seems like the most easy thing to deal with. Okay, we have to redact that. But when we're going to talk about having a strong redaction policy, and maybe a judge is going to be the one to make the ultimate decision, now you have lawyers filing briefs, okay? Because they might be something different than just someone was going to the bathroom. It was a conversation or whatever, what have you. And I thought I read in Supervisor Schmidt's I read it in one of the. We're not redacting anything. We're not changing anything, right? And I know that's one of Supervisor Schmidt's recommendations as well. Well, now with number one, we're tossing that out the window, okay? And then as the sheriff points out, when these videos are used as evidence, one of the first questions that a defense attorney might ask is, what was the chain of custody with this video? Okay? Who has handled it? Okay? Has anybody accessed it? We want to know their names. Have there been any changes? And once you check yes on one of those things, the case becomes much more difficult. And there's a risk, that something could be tainted because someone painted it that way. All I'm trying to say here is, it seems like a simple, straightforward thing, but it's much more complicated than that. I'd like to hear from, Mr. Zoni, what he thinks about, what would happen with evidence that was redacted. You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Supervisor Burry, you're giving away all my secrets. That's exactly what would occur.
Well, there you go. Thank you.
Gary Graziano, do you have anything to add?
Well, I was going to say, Supervisor.
Gary, you're on mute.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
How's that?
Sounds good.
Gotcha.
That better?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a question in regard to Mr. Chimidi's role. Is this coming from the entire Board of Supervisors? Is this coming from a committee within the Board of Supervisors? Where are these recommendations coming from?
Supervisor Chimides, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. So I had done some research. In December, the body camera resolution came up to purchase the body cameras came up very quickly without much preparation. And from all of my understanding of best practices is that you need to have a body camera policy in order to have effective body cameras. And so I really kicked off from there doing research on best practices. When the board actually created a body camera policy a couple months ago, it was still incredibly shallow, right? Like the body camera policy that we passed, or that the county adopted, was the template policy that New York State offers. That actually within the template it says that this is just a baseline intended for counties to customize it. So clearly there's a gap where the county has not taken an ambitious step of identifying what that county policy is. So given that, I did some research on best practices and have produced that document. And I can certainly go through in more detail about why I came up with each one. But I think it was pretty clear that there was a strong need to create a best practices document because the county is yet to do it.
Okay, so going back to my question, are you proposing these based on your supervisory role, based on a committee that you're heading up with the county, or as the assistant to the mayor of the city of Hudson, or you personally?
I guess I'm doing it as a county supervisor, as someone who's interested in these issues. I did some research as a county supervisor and made this recommendation to the rest of the board that this is a good baseline of where to start.
Okay, thank you. And for the other question that I have, how would these recommendations pan out? Is there going to be a vote on this stuff, or like who's going to make the decision? Is it going to be back to the sheriff? That what will be taken from these recommendations and what won't?
So at the end of the day, the sheriff's office has full autonomy over their policies. So at the end of the day, Sheriff Bartlett gets to create policy. The purpose of our committee here is to make a recommendation, I believe, to the Public Safety Committee, which then would make a recommendation, Supervisor Beery, correct me if I'm wrong, to the full board, who would then make a recommendation to Sheriff Bartlett, as we did with the temporary policy. And at that point, Sheriff Bartlett can, adopt it as recommended, or he can amend it as he sees fit, because as an elected sheriff, he does have that autonomy. That's my understanding.
I would like to see us, I'm sorry, Mr. Graziano, go ahead.
No, I was just going to go on record that I do not agree with the 120 seconds for all the reasons that have already been proposed.
My thing with this is, rather than going around and doing several different steps, that sounds very bureaucratic. We're going to go from this group to that group to that group to that group to say whatever it's going to be. We are charged with something that is very, very important here as the implementation committee. And we know full well that we're working with a very good sheriff's office and that they're amenable to working with us. I would like to come away from this particular issue, right, with a consensus, not with, okay, we disagree with you and we're going to bring it to the next level, which is the Public Service Safety Committee. I think I would like to see this group work together and come together on what we should be doing, because again, ultimately it's going to be the sheriff's call, and he should know, his people should know, when we're done with this process on body cameras, this is where it's going to be, okay? So that he doesn't have to deal with, okay, we're going to go back to public safety and we're going to, do whatever we're going to do. And then we're going to go to the next level, finance committee. And then we're going to go to the full board of supervisors. I think whatever we say coming out of this panel should be consistent throughout the entire process. That's why we're here. If it takes an extra meeting or two, right, to come to a consensus on body cameras, well, then so be it. We've got the time.
Thank you so much for that, Supervisor Berry. I totally agree. The purpose that I thought I would be serving here, and I hope that is the case, is that we are looking at the reform package that we put together with the Police Reform Committee. And a lot of that information we have was great information, and Captain the Sheriff's Office did a phenomenal job. I just want to make sure that sometimes when we put things in, when we codify things, there's no finality there, and it leaves us open to interpretation. So if we're drafting law, we can't always say that this is the final law and it's never going to be amended or changed. And I think that's the role that I, at least myself, I believe I'm playing, is after I talk to other people who have other information and listen to the sheriff and so forth, is to see where are the boundaries. And that's why I was asking the questions I asked, is where are the boundaries on this? And if the sheriff feels extremely strongly about it, we try to push him to the edges. But if he's, at the end of the day, he's the expert in the room. So
I don't know if I misunderstood, but I just want to make sure that people don't misunderstand me. I'm not looking to suggest that, what we decide within a 60-minute time frame, is going to be, quote, the law of the land. It's not. And if anyone can point to me a reform that has happened in the past that never had to be undertaken again, please raise your hand, okay? These are all things that change over time. And this policy, no matter how it ultimately is going to be, okay, at some point, someone's going to say, okay, we need to make an adjustment. I don't see that happening in the next few years if we do our jobs right, okay? But it certainly shouldn't be something that we're second guessing when we come out of the panel and going to public safety, and then second guessing when we go to finance because 2 or 3 people didn't like it, okay? That's why I'm saying, let's work together. We're all very intelligent people. We've been around the block before, and we have a great opportunity to do something here, right? So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm going to mute myself now.
I have two questions for clarification. Supervisor Beery and Mr. Zoni talked about, redacting and how difficult that can become in the court. But as Captain Bray said, let's just say that a scenario were to happen right outside of a restaurant or right outside of the sheriff's office where a deputy was in the bathroom and the person who is interacting with the incident presses record. Like, what I'm saying is, even if it was 30 seconds, there could be times when information still needs to be redacted because somebody's going to the bathroom. Is my understanding that what you're saying is that there's less chance for that to happen when it's a shorter time frame? Nobody's saying that we're not still going to need a strong redaction policy, because these things still, even with a smaller buffer time, would come up. Is that accurate, Mr. Zoni, Supervisor Beery?
You want to take that, Mr. Zoni?
Well, I'll defer to the supervisor if he has something to say first.
Okay, so I'll go with this. If it's 30 seconds, 30 seconds is a lot quicker. So if somebody's in a building, and let's stick with that going to the bathroom thing, okay? You're in the building, and it's happening 100 yards away from where you are in the bathroom. Chances are, okay, it's going to take at least 31 seconds for you to get to that place, okay? And that the bathroom part of it wouldn't be included, right? That's what I'm thinking. And if you happen to be right on top of a place or at a place involved in a scene, right, where things are going on, right, you're at a parade, right, you're at some kind of a county fair, whatever it might be, right, you're just doing street patrol, right, chances are you're not going to be in a bathroom, okay? And chances are that, 30 seconds, experts here, 30 seconds should be enough. And if we're going to use the example of somebody yelled, "Hey, he's got a gun," and then it's 60 seconds before the officer engages with that individual, you might not have that, "Hey, he's got a gun," on the camera, but you have a witness that said, "Hey, he's got a gun," which is probably even better than.
And I don't see Supervisor Host.
Sorry, somebody came in the front door. It was unlocked.
That's okay. So in regards to the redaction policy, I mean, the only comment I made before was in response to a question Supervisor Bury asked me. In the legal system, from a defense attorney standpoint, the second a tape is edited, manipulated, however I want to term it, it becomes an issue at trial. That's just a fact. And it could be totally innocently. You have to remember, as a defense attorney, my obligation is to represent my client zealously within the grounds of the law. I'm not necessarily searching for the truth. So if there's an issue and it benefits my client, I'm gonna ride it all the way home. So that's just something, and
that could be the most important piece of evidence that the state has.
Right. So again, I'm kind of caught being on this committee, and I'm happy to be on. I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place because I'm a defense attorney, and so if you're going to ask the defense attorney and me, I want a 120-second buffer. Yeah, because I want as much data and information as I can get, because maybe there's something good on there for me, or something I can use at a trial. Now I'm also, not to make any lawyer jokes, but I'm also a human being, so I can also see the privacy argument. It's tough for me to tell you exactly what's the best recommendation to do here. As a defense attorney, I say 120 seconds. As a human being, I say give them. I think you have to weigh the interest of the police officer's privacy, obviously, as well. That's what I got to say.
Sheriff Bartlett?
Yeah, we are kind of putting Shane between a rock and a hard place, because that is his job to create, to work on having reasonable doubt to possibly to try and acquit his person, and that's his job. So I appreciate Shane being on here, and again, we are putting him kind of in a bad spot here by doing it. And again, I know I've said this before, and this goes back a little bit, but and I know Supervisor Holtling has brought this up as well as a couple other people. But at the end of the day, the sheriff's office are the ones that make and put the policies into effect. It's not the Board of Supervisors. It's not the Public Safety Building. But we are absolutely thankful that we have this committee to hear your opinions, and because policies and Captain Bray can wave and say yes, but policies can be changed. Policies can be are ever moving along with what's going on with our community and what's going on in our country today. I mean, we've seen that in the past year of how things have evolved because of some really bad stuff that happened. So policies are always changing and always moving. You know, I know there's only two people on this line right now probably that can say this, but who has been shot at and who's been shot? Because right now there's two people on this call. And so that's one thing to always keep in mind, that we're looking at as far as their privacy and our employees' privacy, but we're also worrying about, on the flip side, what's best for the public and what's going to be the best bang for the buck as far as these cameras, because I'm so thankful that we got them. But there's a lot of different things that go on out in the field. This isn't an office setting. We are in the field, we're working, and stuff happens that quick. It happens that quick. And it's unless you've been involved with the job to see what happens, in a split second, your life has changed. And so, I appreciate everybody being on here, and I know that Bill and Dave have their hands up, so I'll stop talking.
Dave, you had your hand up, and then Bill.
Yes, I just wanted to say repeat something Mr. Zoni said. I think we have to think really carefully about what's best for the public. It's true. I have family members who are police officers. I have friends who are police officers. So I think I do have a good understanding of how dangerous a job it is. And I don't think anybody on this committee questions whether or not we want to question the professionalism of our police or compromise their safety in any way. But I personally want to keep what's the best for the public in mind always. And speaking of the events that have happened over this past year, I think it's our duty to really think of the most vulnerable populations in our communities and what's really going to work out best for them in terms of policing. And so that's why I lean more towards as much information as we can get. And also, too, I know, speaking as someone who has a record of activism in a number of areas, there are people who don't tell the truth, you know, and if we've got more rollback, that's better for cops. If someone says, oh no, I said this and this is what he did to me. Well, if the camera's rolling for 120 seconds, you know that the cop didn't say this or didn't do this, you know? So I think it's a pretty good balance for both sides. There's no great harm. And I think the of, you know, attorneys wanting this much information, from the justice system works. That's how why we give people the right to an attorney. So, you know, that's going to happen in any case. And whether it's another, 60 seconds or 90 seconds, you know, in the cause of justice, I think we should be really thinking about what's best for people on the ground.
Bill?
Yeah, and I'm grateful for the fact that we have cameras. But one of the things that the sheriff mentioned is cameras within law enforcement and the incidents that we've seen in the past. And that's what it brings me is I've seen some of the incidents that we had in the past, and to have a person's word versus a video, there's no equality, right? The video is always going to be more powerful. Now, how that's interpreted in law, that's for the lawyers and all that to break down. But, trusting a person's word over the video, I just think the video is much more powerful. And we've seen that play out many a times now that we have videos. But I want to go specifically back to something that Captain Bray said about, and we use it many a times, examples of people being in the restroom. And I did not know that cameras could be activated if another officer was on the scene. So we're saying that an officer is in the car having a private conversation with their spouse or something of that nature, and if there's in 10 or 20 feet of that vehicle that arrives and another officer pulls up, would then that officer's camera be activated while he or she is sitting in the car or in the restroom? would that be an incident that could happen?
It would be, and it has happened, and that's why I brought it up. The folks from Axon, I've had conversations with them, doing some research, and they're pretty firm on their 30-second buffer. That's industry standard, and they've come to that determination based on all these factors that we've all talked about today.
So if that's happened, what do we do in that event that, let's say, we are capturing those private conversations, or we are capturing those sensitive moments? What do we do with that part of the video now?
We're not recording 120 seconds now. In fact, for the last 7 years, we've had cameras in the cars, and our buffer has been continuously set at 30 seconds. And we found it to be very beneficial. And I can't think of any instances where we haven't captured what we intended to capture with that 30-second look back, and we had time to spare. I don't think I can recall any incidents where we wish it would have been longer.
Well, no, sir, Captain, that's not what I really asked. Is you said that there were times where private incidents have been captured, and my question was, what did you do with that information that was captured? Is it still on the tape? Is it redacted? What did you do with it?
No, we haven't captured someone going to the bathroom yet on any of our cameras that I'm aware of. This is from my conversation with
private conversations.
Private conversations. We've had people texting, unlocking their phones. We could read their text messages, those types of things. These are cases where we found them through normal supervisory reviews of videos. I don't recall there being any videos yet that have gone to a criminal case where there has been some of that information on them to where we've had to actually deal with that yet.
Right. So then that would lead me to again thinking, if we have captured situations like that you mentioned, are the sheriff's office thinking about policies of how they would handle that if a situation did arise that you would need that footage?
Well, if it's a criminal case and we have video of related to that criminal case, we have to, by law, turn that video over to the district attorney immediately, unredacted. We have no control over it. We have to give that to the prosecutor. That's built into the law. We don't have the sheriff can't set a policy to contradict state law. The law requires him to turn over the discovery material, and that includes the entirety of the video, unredacted. And then once it's in the district attorney's hands, I'm sure that he would have the ability to perhaps go to the court or go to the judge and have some of that redacted. But that's outside of our agency. We would have no concern in that.
So that right there it kind of goes to, I think, what Supervisor Hotelin was saying is, when you capture those kind of moments, maybe we should think about doing a policy that would allow a judge to protect that officer and be able to redact some of that information. That's just the thought. I believe that's where she was going. But this is my last question for you, Captain. Is it your belief that if we did any further than 30 seconds, that we will be capturing more of the private and more private information than necessarily law enforcement information?
I do believe that to be the case, based on the years of experience we've had with cameras already and the buffering that we've already experimented with. I found professionally the 30 seconds of buffer time is more than adequate, and going beyond that, I think is just going to create more problems than it solves. And going back to something Supervisor Beria mentioned before, it's not a case of where we have to run 100 yards perhaps to the incident. You got to remember, these cameras are going to activate as soon as I trigger them to activate. That could be putting my emergency lights on the car on. So if I'm in the bathroom and there's a call 10 miles away, as soon as I run out to my car, which takes me all of 30 seconds, and I turn my lights on, it's recorded me in the bathroom. It has nothing to do with the incident. So that 120 seconds, I think, is far excessive. Not to mention that if there were to be any redacting done on our part, the redaction is 100% done manually, which is going to require a tremendous amount of manpower to do that on every video that we record that perhaps could be subject to a FOIL or to a criminal case or whatever it may be. Somebody's going to have to manually go in and redact everything out of that. And it was we did do it in the training. They showed us how to redact. It's very, very time consuming and very difficult. I don't know how we would do it with the thousands of videos that we're going to make a year.
Thank you.
Supervisor Jerry, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I don't know how to get my hand up on the screen here, but you guys have already addressed some of the questions that I was going to have. But it sounds to me, Captain Bray, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that your camera is rolling, okay, before you're even on the scene. Okay, so you're, and if you're going into somebody's house, right, and you showed up without the lights being on, in all likelihood, you know, when you pull up on the scene, let's say it's a domestic, you know, those two officers with their body cameras before they even get out of the car, maybe even before they got to the house, in all likelihood, right? So when we talk about, and I want to make it clear that I think that body cameras are very important for the public and for the police, okay? But I'm not so sure, you know, given all the events that we've watched unfold over the last year, that body cameras would have made a difference, you know, in those particular things. So let's not look at body cameras as preventing something from happening. Let's look at them as we're going to capture what occurred at that particular event, okay? Which is important, right? Because there are studies out there that show, right, that officers still did what they did, the public still did what they did, even though they knew that there were cameras rolling, right? That becomes a totally incidental kind of a thing, right? So to me, you know, that 120-second look back, the more I think about it, is problematic. And I'm going to go back to Mr. Zoney, and I'm not going to put him on the spot again. But he just got done telling us what happens when you start messing with a video or an audio. And if that is the most important piece of evidence that a DA has, right, we have just jeopardized that. Okay, by saying it's going to have to be 120 seconds. And then you got to go through a redaction. There's something embarrassing on that thing that you don't want anybody to see. And I thought that in this policy that we have in front of us, it's clear. You don't alter. You don't redact anything. There's going to be a timestamp. I think that was one of the suggestions, a timestamp who accessed this video, so that there's a chain of evidence here who's actually handled this kind of stuff. It's all important. We're spending a lot of time on 90 seconds.
So I would just like to say, after hearing from, you know, Captain Bray and Mr. Zoney, it sounds like a redaction policy, you know, might not be the route. I'm wondering, because hearing from, you know, Shane Zoney and hearing from, you know, Dave as a community member, and then also hearing from Sheriff Bartlett and Captain Bray, you know, it seems like there's 30 seconds on one hand, 120 seconds on the other. I do think there are arguments that are valid on both sides, and I'm wondering if they're, you know, Sheriff Bartlett, I'm mainly speaking to you here because you in the end get to make this policy. Is there a compromise? Could we go to 60 seconds to say, you know, we're going to capture a little bit more than what we're currently capturing, but 2 minutes is just too much? Could there be some middle ground, like 60 seconds seems like it would be, you know, kind of get both of those pieces, like Mr. Zoney as a defense attorney was saying, you know, the more information, the better, you know, to be able to defend his clients properly. And then like Captain Bray is saying, you know, 2 minutes is way too much potential private information. You know, could 60 seconds be a potential compromise that everyone could, you know, I mean, the best thing about compromises is no one feels great about them, but everyone leaves going, okay. Do you think, Sheriff Bartlett, there might be like a 60-second compromise there?
I don't know. I'd have to look at it and think about it. I got to be quite frank. Again, we're still going back to, we've got the two dilemmas of what's best for the public, but the police officers are also part of this community and part of this public. And we have to worry about what's going on with them too. I mean, this is sort of like negotiations. You know, I mean, when we sit through contract negotiations, this is what this is reminding me of. And I see Bill laughing because he sat on many negotiation teams with. Yeah. So it's something that we sit down. We have a lot of extremely intelligent, smart, and wonderful people on this panel, and you know, we'll figure out something at the end of the day. And anything's possible, but I'd have to think about it and also speak to my commanding officers about it. I think somebody came back one day and said the thing, I can't remember which supervisor it was, but they were like, you know, the police officers on this panel right now, you're looking at over 50 years of experience, unblemished records. And are there bad cops out there? Yeah, there are, and we've seen it. But you're talking to, I think Columbia County Sheriff's Office has got some of the best police officers in the country, and these men and women work hard. And you know, things that happen in other areas, I would hope we never see it here, but this is what these cameras are here, and this is what we're talking about. So anything's Supervisor Holtley, and anything's possible, but again, I'd have to sit down and really look at it.
Okay, so why don't we do this, since we've spent 50 minutes on number one and we have many more to go through, why don't we come back and revisit this just briefly. Sheriff Bartlett can have time to talk to who he needs to talk to. I do want to also be clear, Sheriff Bartlett, when we talk about the buffer mode, we are talking audio and video, correct? Both audio and video recording?
Yes, because if you, again, altering the document, altering the evidence, and if we only have video, it just doesn't do audio. It does it all. When you hit that button, it does it all. It's not, well, I hit it once for audio, twice for video. It does it all. There is no, you can't split it up.
Perfect. And then my only other, and this is kind of an administrative thing, and I could have missed it, but when I look at the temporary policy, I actually don't see the buffer zone addressed anywhere. So even if we end up at 60 seconds, even if you end up staying at the 30 seconds, I would suggest or recommend that because 30 seconds is just the default for access, what it becomes. But let's say later we go with a different company that has a default of 10 seconds. So my recommendation or request would just be that whatever we do end up, that it actually gets written clearly in the policy that it's audio and video, and that the buffer zone is X number of seconds. Okay. Awesome.
I agree. I'd absolutely agree to that, Supervisor.
Okay. Can we move on to number 2? All right. Number 2, prohibit officers from viewing body camera footage of a critical incident before making a sworn statement. After making a sworn statement, officers may be allowed to view footage and add a supplement to their statements if necessary. They must include a note stating why this supplement was needed. This ensures the most comprehensive and accurate investigations and builds trust with the public. I refer to page 4 and 5 of the actual temporary policy now. When you go under access, permitted review of footage, that's where I see this relating to. And I'll start with you, Sheriff Bartlett, because again, I'm not a police officer. When I read this, I'm kind of going, well, yeah, of course, we wouldn't let them watch it before they made a statement, but I might be completely missing something. So I'll start with law enforcement on this one.
Yeah, and the captain come in here too, but there's been several things that have been looked at, and United States Department of Justice, as far as body-worn camera toolkit, they're recommending that, yes, they can go back and look at it. Police Executive Research Forum, or PERF, reports that the majority of law enforcement executives interviewed by PERF are in favor of allowing their officers to go back and look at it. They believe this approach provides the best evidence of what took place. I go back to what I said 45 minutes ago. What happens this quick, they have to go back and remember everything, and it's something that nobody else can even relate to. If you're sitting in an office and all right, well, I got to take these notes or do this or that, and I got to do this report, or you're talking. I can't wait until we get our simulator machine up and running at the college so I can bring a couple of elected people down, because I want them to go through it and see what an officer goes through in a split second. It's going to be decided on and looked at and litigated for months to come. So as far as this, I would absolutely say, yes, they should be able to go back and look at their body camera footage when they do their report, because there may be some stuff, very traumatic stuff that goes on in a police officer's life. We just had a bunch of police officers shot at in Columbia County a few months ago. Bring some of these young kids in and say, what happened at this particular time? And they're going to be like, gee, Sheriff, I'm sorry. I was hiding behind a tree at that time when they were shooting bullets at me. So there are, again, we're going to go back, and it's going to be both sides, negotiations, but I'm a firm believer that they should be able to go back, and they should be able to look at their body camera footage when they review to do their report.
Supervisor Bury?
Mr. Zoni, so what would you do with video and with a police report, including a supplement, where the supplement says that I had to review the video to make sure that my statement was correct, and I want to change it just a little bit because I realized after I watched this 15-minute video that something was said that I just wasn't. But I had to write my official sworn statement without the benefit of looking at the video first. What would you do with that information?
Well, as a defense attorney or any witness, whether it's a police officer or non-police officer witness, you're trying to get the jury to doubt their credibility. And one of those things is a very common thing is when, so somebody will say something near the time of the event, and then when they testify, if their story is off even a little bit, you try to get the jury to not believe them or get them to think that they don't really know what happened. And if there's a situation where a police officer doesn't remember what occurred for whatever reason, and then says, well, I had to review the footage to then write my sworn statement, then obviously that's an area of attack to attack the credibility of the witness on whether or not they really remember what they say they remembered. It's just a very basic cross-examination tactic. Not only defense attorneys use, but prosecutors use.
And even before body cameras came on the scene, let's go back 5 years.
Yeah.
And you've got a criminal case, and you put an officer on the stand, and the event occurred 3 years ago.
Sure.
And all they have are their notes and the sworn statement. Right?
Sure.
They are allowed to review their notes.
They can review their notes. And obviously, again, if what they wrote down is different than what they actually testified to, even if it's just slightly, that's what defense attorneys do. It's prior inconsistent statement. It's a pretty standard evidentiary rule, and you just try to get the jury to doubt what the witness is saying. Again, whether it's a police officer or a non-police officer. The thing with body cams in general is it's very good, in my opinion, for the police, because it helps them if somebody is making an accusation against them that the body camera can definitively say that's just not accurate. But the second you put the body camera on a police officer as a defense attorney, whether you turn it on or you don't turn it on, I'm always going to be saying, why didn't you turn it on then? Why did you turn it off 30 seconds later? And in a lot of cases, it won't matter. But in some cases, it will, or it'll allow me to make an argument. And maybe there really is an issue there, and maybe there really isn't. But again, my sole duty, my ethical duty, my ethical obligation is to represent my client, zealously into the full bounds, under the full bounds of the law. So the body camera, I think a lot of times helps the cops, but it gives me lots of leeway to use it. So
I'll just take one more minute with this issue. So before we had body cameras, police officers would write things in little tiny notebooks. They would take their notes, right? Station, whatever time it was going to be, 3 o'clock in the morning, they're going to start typing out that report. They are allowed to look at the little tiny notebook, right, before they write their official report.
I'm sure. Yeah, of course.
What is the difference with the video footage that replaces the tiny little notebook? It's still a tool that they could use, right?
Sure.
In their job. So I don't see the benefit of saying that an officer should not be able to go back and review the video, because you could have a case where if we enact this particular provision here, where Mr. Zoni's been able to drive a truck through it because you went back and you changed your report, right, because of this, or the other thing, where if we were back in the little tiny notebook days, that wouldn't have happened.
Are you asking me what my opinion is on it, or just?
No, I know not to ask you a question unless I know the answer.
No, I mean, it doesn't matter to me either way. What it does. Again, I'm in a situation where, as a defense attorney, I would say not let them look at it, because then if there's something different on the tape that they didn't remember, then that's, something I could use on cross-examination, and maybe, maybe it's just something they didn't remember in good faith, or maybe not. Again, like the sheriff said, there's good cops and bad cops. That's not for me to decide personally. That's for a jury to decide in evaluating their testimony when they testify. But yeah, certainly, I'd rather them not be able to look at it as a defense attorney.
And again, let's get back to two things here. Okay, one, heat of the moment. Okay, so there are a lot of things happening in a short span of time, moving very, very quickly. So now I'm going to ask you another question. I think I know the answer. So you're against them looking at the footage of the body camera as a defense attorney because it would help you, defend your client. With a tiny little notebook, if you had a chance to say that officers should not be able to refer to their notes before they write their report, would you say that they shouldn't be able to do that? Look at their notebook for the same reason?
Well, I'll be honest, I never really thought of that because the question's never really been posed to me. It always just was done to assist them. So yeah, sure, why not? But
Sure, you're saying no.
Yeah, no, they can't look at it. But
Okay. All right.
that's been in place for forever, So
Bill Hughes has his hand raised. Oh, sorry, Supervisor Beery, were you done?
Yeah, I am done, and I know that we're running a little bit over here, so Mr. Hughes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So this sounds to me, I was doing policies. It sounds to me like a gotcha, right? I'm not a big fan on gotcha kind of policies and things of that nature. But the more I listened, it seems like when we're talking about recanting information or having a reaccount of information, that a lot of times people on the prosecutorial end isn't afforded that same luxury, right? When we have people who are being charged, that initial statement that they give is given a whole lot of weight, and if they come back and recant that statement, now they're lying, right? And like the sheriff said, it happens that quickly. Okay, as someone who is being accused of committing a crime, it's the same. I should be afforded that same trust or accountability. And I'm looking at cameras now, and this may not pertain to this policy. Like I said, I'm not in favor of gotchas, but because we have a lot of legal minds on here, I want us to think, because I know a lot of people in my lifetime who did a lot of jail time based on the word of a police officer, and they weren't afforded the opportunity to go back and review their notes. So I just want to make sure I put that in the records.
Sheriff Bartlett.
Yeah, I'm sure there's other evidence besides, I would hope there would be other evidence just besides the word of the police officer, number one. Number two, let me make sure everybody's thinking about another group of individuals, because we're missing these people. We're worrying about if the cop's lying. We're worrying about what's going on with the defendant. We're the victims in this. We're the victims in this, and when there's a victim, a rape, a robbery, a murder, et cetera, I'm going way up high on the scale here. Could be as simple as somebody stole a pack of gum from the store on the corner. But we're the victims in this when the prosecution is going and doing the case. And we need to think about them also when we're talking about all the things that we're talking about. And having a good case to present to the district attorney's office, and also having a good case to present to court. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheriff Bartlett. So we are 4 minutes over. We did commit to an hour meeting. So in the justice of people's times, I do think we should come back on number 2, because I did have a few things to add. And Supervisor Beery, do you mind reaching out directly to DA Chaika? I think it's really important that we have representation from his office on this matter.
Sure, I'll contact him.
All right.
And then also, Supervisor Holtman, we can put 3 away right now in 30 seconds. As far as releasing, that's all legal. and that's, if it's an ongoing case, it's not going to be able to be released. So 3 can be taken care of in again, 30 seconds with us, but I'm sure Shane could even chime in on that, where you just can't release something, body camera footage, on an ongoing criminal case that hasn't gone to the court or whatnot. There's legal problems with that.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff Bartlett. So, yeah, let's come back to our next meeting. Hopefully DA Chaika can join us or somebody from his office, and we'll start back on number 2. And Sheriff Bartlett, between now and next meeting, if you can, talk to some of the commanding officers about the 60 seconds, and then we can maybe come to consensus on that as well.
I will, and I'll also speak to the union reps too.
Perfect. Gary, anything?
See you folks on July 6th.
Thank you, everyone.
July 6th at 1 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, Sherry?
I'll make sure that the DA gets the transcript from this meeting, okay?
Great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Zoni, thank you very much. We'll see you next month.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.